Welcome back to Electric Ideas. I'm your host, Whitney Baker. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that I have a few spots yet this calendar year in 2025 for one on one work with me inside of Back to Bright. So, even though I know if you are part of the Electric Ideas community, you are intentional with your time and energy, but this season can be a lot. It gets pretty packed. As the holidays and the year end collide, many moms put their own needs on pause and then kind of promise themselves that they will push the reset button in January. Back to Bright is designed to interrupt that pattern through the holidays and beyond. Together, we are going to clarify what actually matters this season and create simple rhythms of self connection, joy, rest, and boundaries so your time and energy feel like they are designed around the life you want to live versus you just showing up and playing whack a mole and reacting to all the demands and stressors from everything and everyone else in the outside world. You don't have to begin the new year in a hole. You can start now. If you tend to yourself during the holiday rush, you'll step into January feeling more grounded, more regenerated. If you want personalized guidance and practical tools to help you show up for what matters most, there's a link in the show notes where you can immediately claim your spot in Back to Bright. If you have questions, there's also an option to book a quick 15-minute spark call with me. I will let you know to make sure it's a good fit before we begin. And if I don't think it is, I will be totally honest about that. I'm really on a path of perfect fit clients who I really think I can support and help in a meaningful way. So check out the link in the show notes. Feel free to book that quick call with me if you just want to chat and check in and ask questions. And you're also welcome to message me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. I cannot wait to meet those of you who are ready to raise your hand. All right, today I'm connecting with Katherine Morgan Schafler on her book, which I thought was very provocative, called The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control. As a psychotherapist and a former on site therapist at Google, Katherine has really seen it all, and she offers a truly different take on understanding perfectionism. It turns out perfectionism gets a pretty bad rap, as most of us know. But Katherine takes a much more nuanced approach and talks about harnessing perfection properly. And she goes deep into the different types of perfectionism, which is very new to me and I found fascinating. She also talks about the double standard she's witnessed around perfectionistic traits when it comes to men versus women. Even if you don't think you have an ounce of perfectionism in you, this conversation is loaded with meaningful ways to build restoration and delight into your day to day, and also is pretty illuminating on understanding the root of why many women frequently overcommit and overspend their energy doing. If you enjoy this episode and it brings any of your friends to mind for you, do me a favor, send them a text, drop them a line, share the wealth. All right, let's dive in. Hi, Katherine. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I want to dive right in because you talk about how the current way we discuss perfectionism as a disaster on rails. And I
hmm
found your book very enlightening. But I just want to start in the very beginning by talking about perfectionism in a different way that maybe fails to see the possibility that comes along with perfectionism.
Yes, I'm so glad you started there. So I see perfectionism as a power, and any power can be good or bad, right? It can be used for good or evil, as they say. Another way to say that is every power has a dichotomous nature. So beauty can inspire, it can also objectify. Wealth can be expressed philanthropically and it can also exploit. The power of perfectionism is something that I think is an innate human impulse. So that means that everybody has at least a little bit of a perfectionist in them. I do not see perfectionism as a bad thing. And neither does the research world, in part. I mean, what people don't understand about perfectionism is that there are two types, the adaptive type, which is like the healthy expression of it, and the maladaptive type, which is the unhealthy expression of it. And what you usually hear when you hear, oh, my perfectionism is getting in the way. And I've worked in a lot of different clinical settings. I worked on site at Google here in New York City, where I live. I worked in Los Angeles at a residential treatment center for kids who were abused and neglected and became wards of the state of California. I worked in a rehab. I used to have a private practice on Wall Street, and perfectionism popped up in all those contexts. And so there are so many misunderstandings that we have about it, like, oh, it's only something that quote unquote high achievers experience, or that it's only expressed behaviorally, like I want all the pens in a row. And I'm uptight and rigid and probably dress preppy, not in the like new way preppies. I've learned that the youths are using Whitney, they're using preppy in a new, different way than you and I might
Oh
have used.
yeah, I've got two in junior high, so I'm all over
Exactly.
that.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. Like, perfectionism is nobody's problem. How you respond to perfectionism is what makes it healthy or unhealthy as an impulse. And whether you respond to perfectionism with self-compassion or punishment decides whether it's healthy or unhealthy. And when perfectionism first popped up in psychological literature, it was presented as a very healthy, innate human impulse. And I define a perfectionist as somebody who sees the reality plunk down in their laps. And then, as a species, humans have the cognitive capacity to imagine a new and improved, different reality. And perfectionists are people who feel the delta between the reality that is and the reality that could be, and feel an active longing to bridge that gap. As opposed to like an idealist, for example, who also may experience the delta, but is like, oh, wouldn't that be nice? And then they can stop and go on about their day. A perfectionist is like, oh, wouldn't that be nice? What am I going to do about that? And it irks them not to do something. And they can't just quote unquote let it go. Don't sweat the small, all this stuff. And so I think a lot of people view perfectionism as an unhealthy thing because there is a compulsory factor to it. And we think falsely in commercial wellness that if you can't control something that has to do with mental health, it's unhealthy. And that, in my view, is not accurate. So if you think about other things that are compulsory for human beings, to make art is a compulsion, to tell stories, to kiss and touch is sometimes experienced as a compulsion for people, to be together physically, to congregate and gather. And so that's a long way of saying that it's a really unhealthy thing that this personal development space is doing when they write books about perfectionism and run workshops and all this stuff that is basically like, here's how to overcome your perfectionism. Here's how to be less of a perfectionist. And actually, research demonstrates that perfectionists view that identity as what's called an enduring identity marker in the research world. So if you view yourself as a perfectionist, you're going to hold on to that identity throughout your whole lifetime. Just like if you view yourself as a romantic, that's probably not going to go away, or an activist or an artist, that is a deeply ingrained identity. And so it causes a lot of unintentional harm to say, here's how you can be less of this thing that you feel is fundamental to who you are. And my book, The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control, and my approach in my practice as a psychotherapist in general is to take a strengths based approach, which is like, let's look at who you are and let's embrace it. I want you to be all of who you are. And that means leveraging your strengths. And that also means understanding what your weaknesses are and putting boundaries around them and support around them. Not trying to take all your weaknesses and churning them into strengths so you can be good at all things for all the people at all the times. That's not a healthy approach. And so that's how I view perfectionism is everyone's a little bit of a perfectionist. If you feel that active compulsion more often than not, you can call yourself a perfectionist. And we're in the infancy of understanding this construct. And so my book kind of is what perfectionism has meant to me over these many different demographics and years and experience working with all different kinds of perfectionists.
I love the nuance in your book because it is true. If you think about the articles we've seen headlines for, they definitely even have negative language in the headlines. Fix your perfectionism, tame your perfectionist, and so I that definitely reads. A small part of the book that struck me as well was that we don't hear about men worrying about their perfectionism. You gave
Mhm.
a couple examples of classic perfectionists who are rather exalted as geniuses, like James Cameron, Steve Jobs, and then you contrasted to that to maybe Martha Stewart, who if we've read anything about her, we know she can be rather, we've heard, allegedly she can be rather exacting, but that's okay because she's in the non threatening domain of the household. From just a feminist perspective, why do you think women are grappling with, watering down their perfectionist tendencies when it seems men are unconcerned?
Yeah, so I noticed that a lot of people who call themselves recovering perfectionists are women. And I'm very interested in language and the semantics around it. And you could tell a lot about a culture by the language we use. You can tell a lot more about a culture by the language we do not use. And so the fact that men don't use the phrase recovering perfectionist to describe themselves is an arrow pointing to something. It's the same as like strong minded is often used to describe a woman, right? Because it gains a superfluous quality when you use it to describe a man. You don't say, watch out for him, he's a strong minded man. And the subtext there is, well, of course, he's strong minded. Men are supposed to be strong minded, right? So men who are power seeking are called alpha males. Whereas women who are power seeking are called power hungry. And these just go on and on and on, right? So there's resting bitch face. There's no resting jerk face. And there's a reason for that absence of language. And the reason is men are not expected to be pleasing, palatable, smiling, friendly, warm, feminine at all times. And so when they express a neutral facial expression, which is what resting bitch face is, it's like you're not being fun, happy, warm, loving, maternal, you're a bitch, you know?
Mhm.
And it's kind of like, oh, haha, it's funny. We're in on the joke and women joke about it too. But it's actually not funny when you sit back and think about it. And that is how a culture perpetuates gender performance expectations, meaning like that's how culture tells men to act and women to act. That's where we get our instructions. We do not get those instructions explicitly, right? So no one pulls us aside in school and says, "Hey, all the girls on the right-hand side of the class, we're not going to take your ideas as seriously. And that's why we're not going to pay you as much or value your work as much or blah, blah, blah." We just nestle the expectation in everyday language and normalize it. And so when we think about a woman who is powerful and ambitious and is outwardly seeking that, right? She has a clear vision. She wants that vision executed in a particular way. She's assertive in her communication of that. She will often get the message of being a little perfectionistic about it, or she's really rigid. She's very uptight. She's difficult. She's difficult to work with. Whereas, like, when men have this exacting vision, we take all of those pathologized words and we shine them up into visionary. Yeah, he gets angry, but it's because he cares so much. And it's just really predictable. And I pointed out in the book to really let women know, and it's something I ask my reader to do, even if you can only do it for one page of the book, just assume there's nothing wrong with you. Just assume that all the anger you feel, there's a reason for it and it's healthy. And it's, there's a saying in the therapy world that anger comes from the part of you that loves yourself the most. It's protective. And that part of you that wants more, don't assume you're not being grateful enough or there's something wrong because you like having control or power. Like, that's okay. It's okay to want more, to get it, to have the reason that you want more, to be self serving, meaning I want more because I want it, not because it's going to be great for my kids, although it might be, or it's going to serve the world or be contributory in some way to some other person. It's like women just are told so often that they need to justify their desires, and the justification better be damn good. And men just aren't told that. They're just expected to go out into the world and do what they want to do and what they're passionate about and do it to the best of their ability. And so the whole chapter in the book is dedicated to just spelling out the differences and laying it all on the table in a very forensic way so we can be clear about how different the directives really are and where that language of, don't you think you're being a little bit of a perfectionist about this, is not something that's often said to men.
I want to make sure that we talk about these different perfectionist profiles that you examine. And I want to just let everybody in the community know that there is a quiz. You can delve into this. I don't think we're going to take time in the conversation to dig into a ton of nuance, but I do feel like when I was reading this book, what really came up for me when I was reading about these different profiles was, whoa, perfectionism manifests in a lot of different ways that
Mm-hmm.
maybe are not the ways that we think about
Mm-hmm.
usually. And I just feel like now that you're giving this major permission slip for women to own if they have that kind of urge to step into something bigger for themselves, to
Mm-hmm.
explore the different areas. So, what I thought we could do is I could name each one and you could just give us kind of an eagle eye view. So, we'll talk through the
Sure.
five, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, we'll start with the intense perfectionist. Can you tell us a little bit about that person and when their traits might become maladaptive?
Sure. So the intense perfectionist wants the perfect outcome. So their positive qualities, because every perfectionist has positive qualities and negative qualities. Their positive qualities are like these people have razor sharp vision. They don't particularly care about being liked. And so they're very naturally and effortlessly direct, and they will get the job done. On the negative side, if they're not managing this kind of perfectionism, the means don't always justify the ends. So, what this looks like in practice is a manager who's been able to meet and possibly exceed their, second quarter goals, but in Q3, half their team is going to quit because they're all miserable. What it looks like in another way is like a beautifully laid out Thanksgiving table, and everyone arrived on time because it was clear that you must arrive on time, and the food is perfect and the settings are perfect and everyone's dressed perfect. But it's like, did you notice that no one laughed the whole dinner because no one feels present or comfortable? Because yes, we're all having this perfect outcome, but it's not really the outcome that you'd want on the inside. You know what I mean? So that's
Hmm.
the intense perfectionist.
Okay. So, can you contrast that to the second category, which is classic perfectionists?
Yeah, classic perfectionist is the archetype that we most think of when we think of perfectionists. So these people do what they say they're going to do in the way they said they would do it when they said they would do it. So on the pro side, they're highly reliable. They really enjoy their perfectionism and kind of showcase it. These are the people who are like, want to see my itinerary about and spreadsheet about this, all the restaurant options for vacation. And they like it. They enjoy their perfectionism. And that makes them really reliable. On the con side, sometimes being in a relationship, whether it's a professional relationship or otherwise, with a classic perfectionist can feel transactional because they are trying to always offer people what they enjoy, which is predictability, reliability, a clean understanding of all the options involved, but they're not necessarily leading with their internal experience. So you can feel like, okay, I know a lot about that classic perfectionist. I know a lot of facts about that person, but I don't really know them. And on their side, they can sometimes feel taken for granted or taken advantage of because people are like, oh, she loves planning the vacation, or she loves making the deck, or she'll be happy to do it. And that may be true. That person may really enjoy those things, but that doesn't mean they don't want acknowledgement and appreciation for all the work that went into whatever their endeavor is.
Yeah, I can see how that type of person would just kind of get into a little bit of a resentment mode if all of the friends or all the colleagues were like, oh, she loves that, just let her handle it.
Right.
And I also feel like, on the other hand, as someone who enjoys a little spontaneity when I travel, you brought that up. And it's interesting when someone like really wants to like plan everything to the letter.
Yeah.
and that's not your style, I can see where it would just be, it's just a different way of operating. It's very interesting.
Right. And it can feel really jolting. So classic perfectionists can sometimes feel thrown in a way that other people cannot relate to easily. When it's like, oh, I know we have reservations for 12, but we're having so much fun here. Let's just stay here and see what happens. And it's like, what? What do you mean? Where are we going to go? Who's going to plan that? What if everything's closed? And then they can't enjoy the moment that they're in because that's not how they enjoy things. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay, you know?
Just an awareness.
Yeah.
I'd say that the next three categories that we're going to touch on start to get more into the moments in the book where I was like, okay, this is a little different. So the next kind of perfectionist is the Parisian perfectionist.
Yes. So you brought up the great point that perfectionism expresses itself in kaleidoscopic ways. And all perfectionists types are chasing an ideal. The Parisian perfectionist is chasing ideal connection, right? So these are people who really want to feel connected to those around them. On the pros side, they naturally understand the importance of quality relationships. You just don't have to explain it to a Parisian perfectionist. Whereas with an intense perfectionist, you might have to pull them aside and say, listen, I know you want to get this goal done, but if you're not being respectful and thoughtful of your team, that's going to be a problem. And they kind of need reminders sometimes. Parisian perfectionists do not. They are naturally warm, naturally inclusive. They'll go out of their way, for example, to engage someone standing alone at a party. But on the con side, sometimes this type wants connection so badly that they'll take shortcuts to connection. And that looks like really toxic people pleasing and sort of like, oh, well, you like this thing. I like that too. I like that so much. And then, kind of an exaggeration of the version of themselves that they think the other person wants them to be. And I named this type Parisian perfectionist after the beauty aesthetic of French women, which is such an understated, I didn't try too hard. I'm effortlessly chic, which I love the beauty aesthetic of French women vibe. And so Parisian perfectionists are embarrassed about how hard they try, right? So they are trying to always look effortless, like, no worries. Oh, sure, no problem. You need to do it another night. Meanwhile, like they might be crushed internally. And so I think that kind of covers what the Parisian perfectionist is good at and what can kind of be a pitfall for them.
Yeah, it's kind of reminding me of that image of the swan who's just gliding on the surface in what you can see and then like efforting underwater a lot.
100%. Or like what we think of as the cool girl who's just like, oh, sure, I could do that. Like, no problem. So there's maybe some issues asserting yourself, your needs, whereas like classic perfectionists don't have that issue. They're like, I don't want to change the reservation. I want to go there at one, like we planned on doing, because it stresses me out not to do that. And so, again, all of these different types have complementary strengths and weaknesses. And one is not better or worse, they're just different.
Let's talk about procrastinator perfectionists because that was definitely one that felt new to me.
So, procrastinator perfectionists basically want the beginning of the process to feel perfect. And on the plus side, these people are really thoughtful. They see an issue or a route from a 360-degree perspective. They are really well prepared. No one's more prepared than a procrastinator perfectionist. And yet they sometimes spill past the point of diminishing returns when it comes to their preparative measures. And it's like, okay, you're ready enough. You got to start now because you're never going to be 100% perfectly ready. It's never, and what's really interesting to me about this profile is it doesn't matter whether the thing that the procrastinator perfectionist is working on is a pleasing task or one that, we can all understand is not pleasing, like doing your taxes or something. The block is the same, whether you're planning a vacation for yourself or like starting to work on your taxes, because it's not about executing itself. It's about wanting the feeling of, I'm ready now and I can do this really well. It's about wanting that.
I know we're really like digging into these, but I had an example bubble up as you were talking, and sometimes examples just really help me get the distinctions. And I was, for some reason, picturing a woman who's like ready to start a yoga practice, but maybe the procrastinator perfectionist would be like researching every studio within 5 miles and seeing, and then like researching the gear and like figuring out the best schedule. And at some point, as a friend, you'd be like, time to begin, you know?
Right, right. Or like if you think about dating, so let's say someone gets a divorce and they're ready to date and they really want to find a partner and they really want to start an online profile. But they're like, well, I can't because I want professional pictures before I do that. And then let's say they get the professional pictures, but they're like, well, you know what? I really want, this other XYZ thing to be happening in my life so that I can fully focus on dating and have fun with it. And it's like, only you know whether that's true, whether you're really okay with waiting, or whether you're waiting because you're procrastinating in a way that is going to be regretful later.
Well said. All right, so we are on to our fifth and final type of perfectionist, which is called the messy perfectionist. Tell us about their pro con.
Yeah, so they're the counterpoint to the procrastinator perfectionist. So messy perfectionists are in love with the beginning. I call them start happy. I would say they push through the natural anxiety of a beginning, but there is no anxiety for them. They just love starting things. They will start a podcast, they'll start dating, they'll, start painting their room because they want to decorate it in some whatever color, but they struggle when the middle of the process is not perfect. So this is after the kind of euphoria of a new beginning fades. If we think about like New Year's Eve, we all kind of feel a sense of like anything is possible. Yes, I'm going to do it this year. And then it's like, I don't know, February 22nd and some stuff starts to glitch. Maybe it's like January 7th and some stuff starts to glitch. And in response to the glitching, a messy perfectionist is overwhelmed because they have cast such a wide net and said yes to everything that they have left no bandwidth to actually commit to maybe even one thing. Because to commit to something requires a lot of energy and time, whatever that thing is. And we don't have endless time and energy. Those are limited resources of ours. And then what gets dangerous about this type, the same with the procrastinator and all types, if you're being punitive with yourself, is they create a false narrative around why they are not able to complete a task. Nobody takes me seriously. I must not care enough. I can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I'm just not focused. I'll never get my shit together, on and on and on and on. None of that is true. Messy perfectionists just need help in the middle part of the process. And then they'll be fine finishing. Procrastinator perfectionists just need help in the beginning part of the process. If you're a procrastinator perfectionist trying to sell your house and you invite a messy perfectionist over, they'll be like, here's the pictures, here's the thing, and get everything going for you. And that's a big message of the book is like, you don't have to make yourself someone who isn't a messy perfectionist, doesn't love beginnings, and is okay with the tedium in the middle of a process. You don't have to do that. You just have to recognize what's hard for you and then ask for help.
I find that empowering. I feel like awareness is half of it. And that's why I wanted to go into a bit of detail about these different examples so women can kind of see themselves in what you discussed. I also just want to echo what the book said that it's possible we might straddle a couple of these categories. It's not completely rigid, cut and dry. Is that
Right.
fair?
These are all fluid. So, if you think about all psychological concepts are fluid. Like we're introverted, maybe in big groups and maybe shy, but then when we're around people that we know and love, we're like wild and crazy and loud, whatever, like all mental health and mental health constructions are fluid. So you might be a messy perfectionist when it comes to dating, like you will love dating, but then when the third date hits and someone starts chewing a little too loudly or they do something that like gives you the ick, you're like, I'm out. I'm done. This whole thing is doomed. And there's a pattern of that, right? This is about patterned behavior. That's an important note. So you might be a messy perfectionist when it comes to dating and an intense perfectionist at work. You might be an intense perfectionist at work and just be able to get everything done and come home to a house that looks like it got ransacked because you're not a, perfectionistic at home. So these are all context dependent.
I want to make sure I have time to ask you about kind of this notion. I feel like a lot of women in my community have full lives. They're straddling career ambitions, creative ambitions, families, households, but most of them are ambitious in their own ways. And there's sometimes people that'll be like, "Ugh, I just want to like give it all up and lay on the beach and be on the beach forever." And I kind of have this sneaky suspicion that they would be equally as miserable doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talk a little bit about why kind of hedonistic pleasures will never completely scratch the itch for perfectionists, and maybe it will leave them feeling unfulfilled. So, can you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're really enjoying ourselves, it's because our values are aligned with our actions. And when we're really having a hard time, it's because we're not getting something that we need. So that kind of fantasy that might play out of just escapism in some way, I want to just like go live on the beach somewhere, is not really speaking often to an actual desire, but more so this pressure valve that needs release. And those kinds of escapist impulses or thoughts are really clues your psyche is trying to give you that you're not getting something that you need, that something is happening which is unsustainable, and that something needs to change. And there's a value exercise, which I took out of the book, which I'd love to share here to just help. Some of this stuff feels so cloudy and in the air. And when you're in it and balancing so many things, it's hard to just be like, wait, what's important to me? What do I really want to do this year? What is it again? Because ambitious people will always have more in front of them than behind them. So, in some ways, it's sort of like all the stuff you did that you should feel proud of and that is really remarkable is great. And what's also true is that if you're ambitious, you have this constant feeling of like, I'm just getting started. Well, you haven't even seen what I'm capable of. And that's a great feeling, but it can also feel like, oh my God, I've been doing this forever. And I just feel like I'm not even scratching the surface. It's like frustrating. And so just understanding that that's not a reflection of your failure. That's just your ambition. Ambitious people see way more ahead of them than they do behind them. That's what makes them ambitious. But the values exercise is if you take a blank piece of paper, you draw a line down the middle of the paper. And on the left hand side, I want you to write 5 values that are important in this season of your life,
Mhm.
right? So you can pick a season like literal season, summer, winter, spring, fall, or you can kind of define season for yourself. This season of motherhood, this season of me getting, into a relationship, whatever. And so the point is, these are not values that you have to commit to for your whole lifetime. This is a consideration of your holistic life. What's happening in my family? Like, what's happening inside of me? How is my health and body? What kinds of transitions am I going to be encountering? What do I need? What do I want? The 5 values that really help you stay aligned. And then on the right hand side of the paper, you write what those values would look like animated in your everyday life. So the tricky thing about values is like they all sound good. It's like honesty, integrity, adventurous, style, punctuality, all this stuff. So it's hard enough to pick some that really reflect what you want right now and who you're trying to embody and step into. And then it's even harder still to be like, but what does that look like? Let's say presence is on your value list. I really want to be present. Okay, what does being present look like? It might look like not holding your phone in your home. There's a place, a designated place for your phone to go. So the next day after you do this list and you're kind of cooking with the phone in your hand, you're stirring and you're looking at your phone, you're not embodying the value. So you need to go put the phone down. If your value is honesty, one example of what that might look like in your everyday life is a friend texts you and is like, hey, how's it going? And you respond honestly. Doesn't have to be super raw honesty. You tell them everything that's ever happened in your life, right? But it can be like, actually, it's not great. I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. Or you tell them, like, I never felt better. You tell them whatever the honest version of how you're doing is. And this is the key on the back of the paper. Write down 3 values that you have decided in this season of your life, you are no longer going to prioritize. Which values are you going to relegate? And this is really important because if you don't actively and consciously identify what's not important to you right now, as a perfectionist or even someone with just perfectionistic tendencies, what's going to happen is you're going to say, okay, I got my top 5 values and I'm going to embody those values and somehow magically do all the other things, but especially these things. And it's like, we can't do all the things. And so you have to pick what you're going to let go of. And I'll give you an example of this. When my daughter was really little, when she was like 2 or 3, I had presence as a value. What that looked like with a 2 and 3-year-old was playing a lot, like hands and knees on the floor playing. She loved slime and Play Doh and markers and things that made a really big mess. And so on the back paper, I put cleanliness as not a value because you can't be present and playful with the child all day long and have a perfectly clean house. And I like a clean house. It gives me a sense of inner calm. I find it really meditative to clean. I like that. And at the same time, what I want more and what was more important to me at the time was playful presence. Right. And so at the end of the day, during that time, when I'd look around and see the dishes were in the sink or there was like literal Play Doh on the wall, instead of this inner voice of, like, it's just going to take you 6 minutes to do the dishes. Why can't you just do that? Or like, why is there literally Play Doh on the walls? Like, what is this? Instead of that self talk, it was like, oh, wow, you were so present today. You're aligning your actions with your values. That's why the house is messy. I could have easily stick her in front of the TV and have a perfectly clean, spotless house. That's not what I wanted to do. That wasn't more important to me.
Yeah, this is great. I work a lot on this with my mom clients, and I know that this will resonate with them because what I really think is that it's much more empowering when you're intentional. That way, when balls drop, that maybe, yeah, like the house example is perfect. Like I love a clean house too for the same reason. It's almost like a spiritual practice for me, clean tables. However,
Hmm.
if I look around and I intentionally know the reason it's a little messy is because I've chosen to surrender that and live up to a value that's carved out in my current life, it's much easier to give ourselves grace and
Right.
compassion too. I like that you just say by season. I think some women, specifically the procrastinator perfectionist, will probably like take so long thinking about like, well, I like this as a value, but I want to be creative, but I want to do that. I think that I would say, and I'd be curious what you would think to just pick three and give an example and just let it be a playful practice that is almost a way that filters what you say yes and no to in your life too and in your days.
Yeah, that's exactly the point of like creating a center for yourself, a point where you can orient yourself and say, do I want to say yes to this thing? Is it helping me live up to my values? Or is it helping me live up to the values on the back page that were really important to me 2 years ago, but now I don't really care about? I think that's a great point that you're making is you can use this as a screen and you kind of need that stuff because it's easy to get caught up in going through the motions and sort of wander away from your center. It's easy for everybody. And so if you're a procrastinator perfectionist, just do it for 48 hours, even, for 1 week. Again, just I love that. Think of it as more of an experiment than an exercise and say, like, we'll pick for you since that's what you need is like someone who could just get it started for you. So let's pick Whitney 3 values. How about kindness, openness, and honesty? Okay, so if you're having a tough time picking values, just start with those. Abiding by those for 48 hours or a week's not going to steer you wrong. It's going to be fine. And
Yeah.
then pick at least one on the back that you no longer care about. Like I think an important one for me that's been on the back has been being understood by others, right?
Mm,
Because I have in my life wasted a lot of time and hemorrhaged a lot of energy explaining myself. Oh, well, you see, the reason I'm not going on that vacation with, this whole group is because I'm trying to do this and that and whatever. And I just want you to understand I'm still a good person. I still care. I'm still family oriented, or I'm still this. And I kind of like make a case. And sometimes I'm making a case just for myself. Like nobody's even thinking about it that much. You know what I mean? And it's just something that I feel self-conscious about. And so being understood by others, sure, having one or two people that are your close people really understand you, and those are your friends and, partner, perhaps, whatever, understand you is great and healthy and beautiful. But having everyone understand you is just a wild goose chase. Some people are going to misunderstand you and judge you, and you're not going to be able to control that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful example. I'm really glad you shared that. I know we're coming up on time. I just want to touch real briefly, regardless of your perfectionistic category or tendencies, I feel like women societally are often told to override our pleasure and rest and delight in life. And that's something that's really important for me and something we talk about a lot on this show. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more from this perspective of like taking this from this ethereal kind of ideas to like day-to-day practices as you are a mom, you are a professional. How do you create these rhythms for yourself in a way that feels nourishing and honest and supportive, where you don't feel like it's just a guilty indulgence?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll just share in the past year, I have been tweaking a routine and schedule that's based on a ton of structure. Because after writing The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control, I went through this phase of like allowing myself to be untethered. And it was that was just the season and exploratory and doing a bunch of different things. And I enjoyed that. I learned a lot, grew a lot. And now I need to really tighten things up. I think what I learned was in my mind, the way this looks perfectly played out is I take a whole 2 days, which feels like so long to me in the moment of like 2 days. That's so indulgent to like decide who am I? What do I want? What brings me joy? What do I want to contribute to the world? How do I want to do that? And when will I do that? And if I take 2 days to plan that, then it should just happen and I should figure it out. And that should be enough. And even saying that should be enough, it feels like it's too much. When in actuality, what has happened in my life is that those questions take months and sometimes years to answer. The routine that I have just landed on took me a year to tweak, play around with, start doing this, stop doing this. Really had to let go of versions of myself that I outgrew, that I wasn't sure if I'd outgrown, that I'd be comfortable with. It's just like a lot of inner work that nobody sees, nobody gives you credit for. You have to be the one to applaud for yourself. You have to be the one to know this is worth it to me. And now thinking about trying to do what I've done in the last year in 2 days is like so laughable to me. It's like we are just over indexed on efficiency. And I have a question in the book, which is like, efficiency for what? Want to efficiently figure out what you're going to do in this life so that what? So that you can contribute and feel alive and feel joyful and peaceful. You can do that every day through knowing that you're actively exploring it and honoring that. You want to efficiently fall in love. You want to efficiently like make art. Efficiency for what? And it's like, I want to enjoy my life every day. And that has taken a lot of time and consideration and testing. And so I guess I say all that to say, like, it takes time. My favorite Georgia O'Keeffe line, to see takes time. Even just really being able to see what it is that you want in this limited life takes time to answer that question. And so just listen to your body. Listen to what feels good. It always feels so simple to say that it feels awkward, but it's like your body will tell you. If you think about your friends, there's this test called the couch test of like, go through all your social people that are your friends. Whose couch could you easily fall asleep on and take a nap? And not even your friends, like family too. Whose couch could you never fall asleep on and take a nap on? You will have an answer to those questions. That's your body telling you you're not comfortable around this person in a certain way,
Hmm.
or this other person is so easy and natural for you to be with. Your body will tell you when you're tired. Your body will tell you when you're doing something you love because you'll lose track of time. Your body will tell you when you're doing too much because you will feel resentment. Your body is always talking to you, and it's your job to listen and then be responsive. And I have the whole back half of the book is about really how to start trusting yourself again and really accessing your instincts and intuition about how to be all of who you are.
Oh, that's a great place to close. Thank you. I always end my episodes with an opportunity for reflection. So, in this area of reframing perfectionism as potentially a gift that's meant to be of service to our brightest lives, what's one
Mhm.
question women could be asking themselves more?
What do I want? And if you have trouble answering that question and really keeping yourself centered, I sometimes preface it with imagine your family and your children in particular, if you have them, all of your friends and the world's problems are solved. Everything else is somehow mysteriously, magically going well. What do you want? Because
Hmm.
women often respond to that question with, like, well, I want people that I love to be happy, or I want to, do something for my mom who's always taken care of me and now she has this debilitating illness. And it's like, you can want all of those things. That's what you want for other people. What do you want for you?
Beautiful. Thank you, Catherine. I hope people will read the book and follow you and learn from you. So, where's the best place to connect?
You can go to my website, katherinemorganschafler.com. The book is The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control, A Path to Peace and Power. And you can get it in hardcover, on Audible, on Kindle, wherever you buy books. And I'm also on Instagram at Katherine Morgan Schafler.
Wonderful. This was a great conversation. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this too.